My son texted me, "Don't expect us for Christmas 2025. We're going to Brielle's parents. They matter more." I stared at that message until the words stopped looking real. Because I didn't just read it. I felt it. Like somebody had opened my chest and pressed a thumb right into the softest part of my heart. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Overland Park, Kansas, the same table my late husband and I used to laugh around, argue around, pray around. My coffee was still steaming and the house was still quiet in that morning way. But my whole world suddenly sounded like glass cracking. They matter more. Not "we already promised them." Not "we'll come the next day." Not even "I'm sorry, Mom." Just, they matter more. And for a few seconds I couldn't breathe right. I'm 70 years old. I've buried the love of my life. I've survived sickness scares and lonely nights and the kind of silence that can swallow you whole. But I swear to you, nothing has ever hurt me the way it hurts when your own child tells you plain as day that you don't count. I didn't cry immediately. At first I just sat there frozen, like my body couldn't decide whether to fall apart or pretend it didn't happen. My hands were wrapped around my mug but I didn't even feel the heat. And what made it worse? I had been trying so hard to make Christmas special. I had already bought Evan's favorite peppermint bark. I had presents tucked away in the hall closet. I had the little cinnamon candles lined up like soldiers on the mantle. And I had this silly hope, this stubborn mother's hope, that Christmas would fix what the year had been breaking. Because this wasn't the first time Evan had made me feel like an afterthought. It had been happening slowly, quietly, the way betrayal often does. He used to call me every few days, then once a week, then once every couple of weeks, then just whenever Brielle let him. When he did call, his voice sounded rushed, like he was checking off a chore. "How you doing, Mom?" And before I could say anything real, before I could admit that the nights felt too long, he'd slide right into, "Yeah, listen, we can't make it Sunday." I told myself not to be dramatic. He's grown. He's busy. He has a life. That's what I kept telling the part of me that wanted to beg, "Please don't forget me." And then came the money. The first time he asked, he sounded embarrassed. "Mom, we got hit with a surprise car issue. Can you help us with $12,800? Just for a month." I sent it the same day. Because what kind of mother says no when her child sounds desperate? Then it was $19,500 for a program Brielle needed. Then $28,000 for refinancing. Then more and more and more. And with every transfer, Evan got colder. No visits. Short replies. Excuses. And Brielle started answering his phone like she owned it. "He's busy. He'll call you back. He's stressed, you know how he gets." I knew how he got, all right. He got quiet when he was hiding something. Still, I kept telling myself I was imagining it. That my son still loved me. Until that Tuesday morning, when he finally wrote what he'd been showing me for months. They matter more. I looked around my kitchen. The framed wedding photo, the empty chair where Samuel used to sit, the little Christmas lights blinking softly in the window, and something in me snapped clean in two. Not my love. My blindness. I didn't call Evan. I didn't text him back. I opened my laptop with hands that finally felt steady. And I did something I never thought I'd do to my own child. I logged into every account I'd opened for him since the day he was born, and I took back control. Because if my son wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, then he was going to learn what it feels like to lose the thing he cared about most. And the next morning, he showed up at my door. Not with a hug. Not with tears. But with panic in his eyes, like a man running toward the only ATM he knew still worked. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a broken holiday. This was betrayal. By the time Evan knocked on my door the next morning, my heart had already been through every kind of pain there is. The sharp kind. The dull kind. The kind that settles in your bones and makes you feel old in a way birthdays never do. I was standing in my hallway, still in my house slippers, when I heard the knock. Not gentle. Not patient. 3 hard raps, like he expected the door to open just because it was him. I didn't rush. I looked at the family photos lining the wall first. Evan at 5, missing 2 front teeth. Evan at 16, grinning with his arm around his dad. Evan on his wedding day, smiling wide, looking like a man who still knew where home was. Then I opened the door. He was standing there with his coat half-zipped, hair messy, eyes wild. Not worried about me. Not embarrassed. Just urgent. "Mom," he said, like the word itself should fix everything. I stepped back so he could come in, but I didn't hug him. that seemed to confuse him. He followed me into the living room, pacing before I even sat down. "What did you do?" he blurted. I folded my hands in my lap. "Good morning to you too, Evan." "Don't do that," he snapped. "You know what I mean." I checked my accounts. Everything's locked. The savings, the investment account, the joint emergency fund. It's all gone. I looked at him then. Really looked. There was no guilt on his face. No concern. Just fear. "No," I said calmly. "It isn't gone. I moved it." "You moved it?" His voice shot up. "Mom, that's my money." That sentence hurt more than the text. I stood up slowly. "That money was never yours. It was money your father and I saved. For decades. For your benefit, yes, but it was never a blank check." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is crazy. You're overreacting. It was just a message. You always take things too personally." I laughed then. A short, broken laugh that surprised even me. "Too personally?" I repeated. "You told me I didn't matter. On Christmas." He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, I heard heels on the porch. Brielle walked in without waiting for an invitation. She looked perfect as always. Hair smooth, makeup flawless, expensive bag hanging from her shoulder like armor. "There you are," she said sharply, looking at Evan. Then she turned to me. "Margaret, we need to talk." "No," I said. "You need to listen." Her smile twitched. "You're being emotional." That was when I knew this wasn't just my son failing me. This was a partnership. "You've taken $86,000 from me in less than a year," I said, my voice steady. "You've stopped calling. You've skipped holidays. And when I asked for confirmation about Christmas, Evan told me I don't matter." "That's not what he meant," Brielle said quickly. "It's exactly what he meant," I replied. "Because actions finish the sentences words start." Evan stepped forward. "Mom, we're under pressure. You don't understand how hard things are right now." "How hard?" I asked. "Hard enough to lie to me. Hard enough to disappear until you need another transfer." Brielle crossed her arms. "So what, you're punishing us?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. She scoffed. "From your own son?" "Yes," I said. "From my own son." That's when Evan's voice dropped. "You can't do this," he said quietly. "We need that money." The way he said need sent a chill through me. "What do you need it for?" I asked. "Because I'm starting to believe none of your stories were true." For a split second, Brielle's face drained of color. Then Evan looked away. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. "Get your coats," I said softly. Brielle bristled. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said. "You're not welcome here right now. Not until you're ready to be honest. And not until you remember who I am." Evan stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. "This isn't over," Brielle snapped. I nodded. "No, it isn't." They left without another word. And when the door closed, I leaned against it, my knees shaking, my chest tight. But for the first time in months, my mind was clear. Because whatever they were hiding, whatever storm was coming, I had finally stepped out of its path. That afternoon, after Evan and Brielle drove away, the house felt too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that presses on your ears and makes your thoughts louder. I stood in my living room for a long time, staring at the door they just walked out of, wondering how it was possible for someone you carried inside you for 9 months to become a stranger standing in your hallway. My hands were shaking, so I sat down and forced myself to breathe. Slow in. Slow out. Then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I started writing everything down. Every transfer. Every excuse. Every promise to pay it back soon. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank history. Line after line stared back at me like evidence in a courtroom. $12,800. Car repairs. $19,500. Certification program. $28,000. Refinancing. Smaller amounts in between. Thousands disappearing in silence. By the time I added it all up, my stomach turned. $86,300. And that didn't even include the accounts Evan didn't know I'd locked. What hurt wasn't just the money. It was the realization that my son hadn't just fallen on hard times. He'd been strategic. I thought back to moments I'd brushed off before. The way Brielle always asked how much I still had saved. The way Evan rushed me through conversations when money came up. The way they never invited me to see the house renovations I'd paid for. I remembered something Brielle once said at a family barbecue. "Evan's lucky," she'd laughed. "His mom's got things handled." At the time I'd smiled. Now it made my skin crawl. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me sit up. Every car passing made me look out the window. Not because I was afraid of burglars. Because I was afraid of my own child. By morning my grief had hardened into resolve. I needed help. Real help. So I made an appointment with an attorney downtown, a woman recommended by a friend at the library. Diane Fletcher. Estate planning. Family law. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. The kind of place that made you feel like things were handled properly. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The money. The message. The confrontation. When I finished, she closed her folder slowly. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "what you're describing is financial exploitation." The word landed heavy. "I gave it willingly," I said. "Does that still count?" She nodded. "Intent matters. And patterns matter. And this is a pattern." My throat tightened. "What do I do?" "First," she said, ticking off fingers, "we lock down everything. No joint access. No authorized users. Second, we revise your will immediately." My heart skipped. "Remove Evan?" "Yes." The finality of it made me dizzy. "And third," she continued, "you document every interaction from this moment forward. Texts, calls, visits. If he pressures you again, we need proof." I hesitated. "He already came to my house." Her eyes sharpened. "Did he threaten you?" "No," I said. "But he demanded money." She leaned forward. "Then you need to be prepared. People who feel entitled don't handle boundaries well." I left her office with a folder so thick it barely fit in my bag. On the drive home my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Mrs. Collins?" a man asked. "This is Detective Harris with Johnson County. I'm calling regarding your son, Evan Collins." My heart stopped. "Yes." I whispered. "There's an ongoing investigation involving bankruptcy fraud. Your name came up in connection with several undeclared cash deposits." The room spun. "Fraud?" "He filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago," the detective continued gently. "Over $500,000 in reported debt." I gripped the steering wheel. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," he said. "But we need records of every financial transfer you've made to him in the last 2 years." The truth hit me all at once. The desperation. The urgency. The panic in his eyes. He hadn't been struggling. He'd been hiding. And I had almost handed him the last thing protecting me. That evening I locked every door. Pulled every curtain. And sat alone in my living room, realizing the betrayal ran far deeper than a cruel Christmas text. My son hadn't just broken my heart. He put me at risk. I didn't tell anyone about the detective at first. Not Helen next door. Not my friends at the library. Not even the attorney who already knew too much. I needed time to let it sink in. Because once you realize your own child may have been committing crimes while using your love as cover, something inside you changes forever. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the folder Diane had given me, flipping through pages like they might rearrange themselves into a different truth. They didn't. Every lie lined up too neatly. Every excuse fit too well. By morning I felt numb. Not broken. Not angry. Just hollow. That's when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Evan's car parked crooked along the curb. My chest tightened. This time he wasn't alone. Brielle stood beside him, arms crossed, jaw set like she'd already decided how the conversation would go. I didn't open the door right away. I texted Helen next door. "Evan's here. If you hear shouting, please come over." Her reply came instantly. "I'm watching." I opened the door just enough to step onto the porch, keeping my body squarely in the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked. Evan's face was flushed. "Mom, we need to talk." "No," I said. "You need to listen." Brielle laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like we're criminals." The word made Evan flinch. I ignored her and looked at my son. "Why didn't you tell me you filed for bankruptcy?" His mouth opened, then closed. Brielle jumped in. "That's none of your business." "It became my business when you took my money and hid it from the court," I said. Silence fell heavy. Evan stared at the porch floor like it might swallow him. "Mom," he said finally, voice cracking, "I was trying to fix things." "By lying?" I asked. "By draining my accounts?" Brielle stepped forward. "You don't understand pressure. You don't understand what it's like to have everything crashing down." "I understand betrayal," I said quietly. That's when Evan snapped. "You're blowing this up," he shouted. "We needed help. You had money." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "So that's it," I said. "Because I had it, you were entitled to it." Brielle rolled her eyes. "Oh please. You weren't exactly using it." That sentence stole the air from my lungs. "You need to leave," I said. Evan looked stunned. "What?" "You're not welcome here right now," I repeated. "And if you come back asking for money again, I will call the police." Brielle's face twisted. "You wouldn't dare." I met her eyes. "Try me." Evan reached for my arm. Not hard, but firm. "Mom, please. Just help us one more time." I stepped back. "Let go of me." Something in my voice made him release his grip. Brielle grabbed his sleeve. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "You'll regret this." They stormed off, Evan glancing back once, his face a mix of anger and fear. I locked the door and slid down against it, shaking. That night I called Detective Harris back. I told him everything. The visit. The pressure. The threats. "You did the right thing," he said. "If they come back, call us immediately." The next day Diane filed for a restraining order. Seeing my own son's name on legal paperwork felt surreal. But what hurt more than the paperwork was the truth finally settling in. Evan hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to reclaim what he thought belonged to him. And for the first time in my life I understood this painful truth. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's permission. And I was done giving it. The hearing was scheduled for the Monday before Christmas. I barely slept the night before. Every sound outside made my heart jump. Every passing car felt like a threat. I kept replaying Evan's face in my mind. The anger. The entitlement. The way he looked at me like I was withholding something that belonged to him. By morning I felt exhausted but strangely calm. I wore a simple navy sweater and my late husband's watch. Not for luck. For strength. Diane met me outside the courthouse. She squeezed my hand and said quietly, "Just tell the truth." "That's enough." Inside the courtroom the air felt heavy. Then Evan walked in. He looked smaller somehow. Not like the little boy I used to carry, but like a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. Brielle followed behind him, dressed sharply, eyes scanning the room like she was already planning her defense. When the judge called the case my chest tightened. Diane laid everything out calmly. The money transfers. The joint accounts. The pressure. The confrontations at my home. When it was Evan's turn to speak he sounded confused. Defensive. "She offered to help," he said. "It wasn't exploitation. It was family." The judge leaned forward. "Did you disclose these funds during your bankruptcy filing?" Evan hesitated. "No." Brielle cut in. "It was a gift." The judge turned to her. "Then why demand access when the accounts were closed?" Silence. I was asked to speak. I stood slowly, my knees trembling. "Your Honor," I said, "I raised my son to be honest. I helped him because I loved him. But love shouldn't come with fear. I'm afraid now. And I just want peace." The judge nodded. The ruling came quickly. A 1-year restraining order. No contact. No visits. No pressure. When the gavel came down I felt something lift from my chest. Evan's head dropped. Brielle's lips pressed into a thin line. They didn't look at me as they left. Outside the air felt colder but cleaner. That night I sat alone with my Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner. For the first time in weeks I didn't feel ashamed. I felt safe. 2 days later Detective Harris called again. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "I wanted you to hear this from me. Federal charges are moving forward." My stomach dropped. "Evan has been formally charged with bankruptcy fraud," he continued. 3 counts. I closed my eyes. "What happens now?" I asked. "There will be a trial. You may be called to testify." After the call I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough already. Christmas came quietly. No knocks. No calls. No apologies. Helen brought over soup and insisted I join her family for dessert. I said yes. And as I sat there, surrounded by laughter that didn't come with conditions, I realized something important. I hadn't lost my family. I had chosen myself. And that choice was going to change everything. January arrived with a kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The holidays were over, the decorations packed away, and for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for a phone call that might never come. The silence was strange. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. A week after New Year's, Diane called me into her office again. This time there was no urgency in her voice. No warning edge. Just facts. The prosecutor has filed formal charges, she said gently. 3 counts of bankruptcy fraud. I nodded like I'd already known. Because somewhere deep down I had. They're also naming Brielle as a cooperating witness, she added. That one still stung. Not because I expected loyalty from her. But because it confirmed what I'd seen all along. When things fall apart, people show you exactly who they are. What happens to Evan? I asked quietly. Diane paused. If convicted, he could face prison time. Likely a few years. A mother is supposed to beg at that moment. Cry. Plead. Ask what she can do. I didn't. Because for the first time I understood something painful and freeing all at once. Saving him now would only finish destroying him. February brought gossip. Small towns thrive on it. I heard that Evan and Brielle's house was being seized. That their credit cards were frozen. That Brielle had already moved back in with her parents in Missouri. She didn't leave a forwarding address. Evan, I was told, had picked up a second job at a warehouse while waiting for court. When Diane asked if I wanted to attend the trial, I shook my head. I can't watch, I said. But I'll tell the truth if they ask. The trial happened in early April. 3 days. Bank statements. Emails. Testimony. Even Brielle took the stand. She cried. She blamed stress. She blamed Evan. She never once said my name. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. When Diane called me with the verdict, I sat on my porch and listened to birds arguing over the feeder like nothing in the world had changed. How long? I asked. 3 years, she said. Eligible for parole sooner if he behaves. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat there a long time. I didn't feel relief. I felt finality. In May a letter arrived. Handwritten. Evan's handwriting. Diane had already read it to make sure it didn't violate the order. It was 7 pages long. He wrote about panic. About debt. About a gambling problem he'd hidden for years. He wrote about shame. He apologized. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. He asked for forgiveness. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not because I was cruel. Because forgiveness is not the same as access. And I wasn't ready. Summer softened everything. Helen pulled me into her book club. Susan convinced me to volunteer at a women's financial literacy program. Dorothy dragged me to watercolor classes every Saturday morning. I laughed more than I had in years. I slept better. I stopped jumping at every sound. I turned Evan's old bedroom into a little art space. Donated the things I'd been holding onto out of guilt instead of love. In June, I took a solo trip to Maine. 5 days by the ocean. No one asking me for anything. No one expecting me to fix their mess. Just me, a book, and the sound of waves reminding me that life keeps moving. Sometimes without apology. And that's okay. Because I was finally moving with it. By late summer, my life barely resembled the one I'd been living a year earlier. Not because it was louder or busier. But because it was lighter. The kind of light you don't notice until the weight is gone. I stopped checking my phone every morning with dread. Stopped rehearsing conversations that never happened. Stopped blaming myself for a grown man's choices. In August, another letter came from Evan. Shorter this time. Careful. Neat. He told me he'd been sober for 6 months. That he was attending meetings inside the facility. That he'd taken a job in the prison library. I understand now, he wrote. Not just the money. The way I treated you. I was a terrible son. You deserved better. I read it once. Then again. And I cried. Not the sharp, tearing kind of crying. The quiet kind. The kind that comes with acceptance. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him. But because healing doesn't run on guilt. September came with my 71st birthday. Helen threw me a surprise dinner in her backyard. Just a handful of women who'd become my family without ever asking for anything in return. They gave me silly gifts. A mug that said, "Nevertheless," she persisted. A paint set I didn't need but loved anyway. That night, sitting alone on my porch with a glass of wine, I thought about everything I'd lost. And everything I'd gained. I'd lost the illusion that unconditional love means unlimited sacrifice. I'd lost the belief that being a good mother requires self-erasure. But I'd gained peace, boundaries, and a version of myself I actually liked. In October, news reached me through the same small-town grapevine that had carried everything else. Brielle had been arrested in Arizona for writing bad checks. Multiple counts. Different names. Different accounts. History repeating itself. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just distance. November brought one last call. A parole officer contacted Diane, who relayed the message to me. Evan would be released early for good behavior. He planned to move to Ohio to live with his uncle. He wanted permission to send one final letter, assuring me he wouldn't come back or interfere in my life. The letter arrived a week later. Simple. Direct. Dates. Addresses. An apology without excuses. "I won't bother you again, Mom. I promise. I just want you to be happy." I placed the letter in the same drawer as the others. Closed it. And for the first time I didn't feel unfinished. Thanksgiving came quietly. Helen invited me again. I brought pie. I laughed until my cheeks hurt. And when Christmas decorations appeared in the neighborhood, I didn't feel the old ache. I felt free. Because I finally understood something that took me 70 years to learn. You can love someone deeply, and still refuse to be destroyed by them. And that lesson stayed with me as the year turned, and my life settled into something steady, honest, and mine. This December, as I sit by my window watching snow settle softly on the street, I think about how close I came to losing myself trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. I'm 71 now. Not broken. Not bitter. Just awake. A year ago I thought being a good mother meant endless sacrifice. I thought love meant saying yes even when it hurt. I thought family loyalty required silence. I was wrong. Love without respect is not love. It's control dressed up as obligation. I still love my son. That never disappeared. But love doesn't mean access. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Evan is living his life now far from here. I hear he's working, staying sober, keeping his head down. I hope that's true. I hope he grows into someone who understands what he almost destroyed. As for me, I wake up every morning with peace in my chest instead of dread. I drink my coffee slowly. I volunteer. I paint badly and laugh about it. I travel when I want. I say no without explaining. My home feels like mine again. And when Christmas comes, I don't measure it by who shows up or who doesn't. I measure it by how safe I feel in my own skin. If you're listening to this and you're being treated like an ATM instead of a person, if someone keeps taking while calling it love, if guilt is the only thing holding the relationship together, please hear me. You are allowed to draw the line. You are allowed to protect yourself. Even from family. Especially from family. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it in time. Now I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have kept giving, or would you have closed the door when respect disappeared? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And let me know what city or state you're listening from. I truly love seeing how far these stories travel. If this story spoke to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Mabel's Stories so more people who need to hear this can find it. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to choose yourself.